is by setting up these various points at which they'll be able to, hopefully, from their viewpoint, divide this movement along self-reinforcing lines. So, for instance, what they do is they come on out with the idea that, and we've known this for years, and I can go into some interesting personal history about gene splicing and so on, but so they come out with the idea that there's these markers within human DNA that indicate that we are in fact spliced together critters at the DNA level. And oh, by the way, it looks like at least 15% of the populace of the planet, irregardless of any kind of race or subgroup, have this alien DNA in them. Which would beg the issue of how did it arise if it wasn't transmitted through family lines? Is it from, abductions or implants or hybridization or what? However, not following that trail at all, what they've done is they've established now the concept that, the 15% of humans that have, let's call it space alien DNA, are immune from mind control and will have these other special abilities, right? Which they're not defining at this point. They just keep relating it back to the idea of being special. You'll be more aware, you'll pick things up. In other words, you're going to join this group because the way that they're defining it, or the way it is being defined. Now get this, here's the real rub on the whole thing. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. It could be true that 15% of the populace indeed does have space alien DNA and is indeed resistant to mind control, but it doesn't matter whatsoever, because what the powers that be are going to do is they're going to come out later and try and split the populace along that line and separate out these 15% and have them, in essence, probably fall into a sub-minion class and turn on the rest of humanity, because they'll have a point of how do I want to say this, a point of separation that makes it easy to see the other 85% of humans as less enlightened beings, or potentially even more primitive beings. And so you could treat them, very much the way we would treat test animals in some regards. Bear in mind, we do atrocious things in our science labs to intelligent beings such as dolphins and chimpanzees, this kind of thing. So the concept is not very far-fetched. It's also the same mechanism that allowed the National Socialists in Germany to isolate and separate out the Jewish population. And basically, it's the old divide and conquer approach, just updated to our new millennia and the potential introduction of information about space aliens that our forecasts, anyway, seem to indicate will really be flooding in on us all through next year.
So the whole idea is they're going to kind of trick these people into believing that they're special, and they're going to be their new army, in other words.
Yeah, or they're stooges, or however one you want to think about it. It means that they're controllable. It gives the powers that be a hook into their mindset, and at the very most innocuous level of it all, they could be used to disrupt any organizations that these people belong to. And it also instantly sets up a pathway in their brain to respond to hierarchical control based on whether or not you've got alien DNA. Then the next step is, well, I've got more alien DNA than you, so therefore I should be in charge, that kind of thing, right?
Oh,
it's the old divine right of kings.
Right.
But the strange part of this is that effort is but a small part of a greater effort that's ongoing right now in the media, and that we're able to pick up because we monitor language and imagery. And there's a whole lot of sites out there, by the way, that are just fascinated with images and symbols, and so there's thousands of people that are analyzing everything that ever comes out of any place and writing their conclusions about it. And just part of our processing, we have a spider that goes on out and aggregates all of their language about things and pulls up new symbols that are being discussed. You'll note that there's been I think recent, say going back only 3 or 4 months, we've seen a huge rise in the powers that be going in and attempting to do media overdose on subjects. And that's where they blast you with an idea continuously for 24, 36 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours if they can pull it off. And they do this in such a way that you're still sort of fascinated and you don't shut the television off, but you're getting subjected to this very subtle and actually very powerful level of neuro-linguistic programming, which is basically a means of mind control. And what they do is they have repetitious phrases that go into your mind that they associate with an emotional stance or context that they want you to have. So, for instance, they were doing this through the Kennedy funeral period. But let's get a real blatant visualization of this so that everybody can identify with the concept. You remember, what's his name, the Democratic fellow that did the big hee-haw, and all of a sudden he wasn't a candidate anymore because CNN and all the other news stations played that hee-haw noise he made in the crowd day after day after day and associated it with ridicule. And within like 24 or 48 hours after their process started, I think they played it 600 times over the next week. In any event, it totally destroyed the idea that this fellow, I think his name was Dean, was going to become a viable presidential candidate. And he went on to later, as a sort of sop to him, they gave him the status of the head of the Democratic Party. But the point being is that they engineer viewpoints at a mass level in how they use language in the presentation of these images. And we've noticed a large number of changes and increases coming out of the powers that be that relate back to this image level of mind control. Some of it down to the subliminals, but some of it is also rather blatant. And they're getting ready for something, or they're actually making their move, so to speak, now at the level of their engineering of their propaganda media and what they're presenting. You'll notice that you just can't go, if you turn on the television on any of the cable news channels, you can't go a day without hearing that, oh yes, just a few days from now we'll have that swine flu stuff available for you. And now you're seeing that it's being promulgated out in terms of the vaccine, and they'll give you $100 off at this pharmacy if you'll come and get your shot there, or you can go to your grocery store and get 10% off your bill if you'll take your shot at the grocery store. And their level of association with this kind of stuff is, well, as I say, it's getting rather blatant. I think it indicates that things are moving rapidly apace, not necessarily 100% in their control, or they're starting to feel that they're losing control of things.
Oh, I agree. They're definitely feeling they're losing control. And the one thing, I read George's site, urbansurvival.com, and he keeps harping, and it's in your report. The big one to watch out for is 10/25 this year, October 25th. And what are you guys picking up on that?
Well, there's two levels that has to be looked at. Within our data, October 25th is a sharp, hard turn in what we call the emotional tension factor. Our emotional tensions are basically, when I started this off, I had to divide things, and in order to get a vision of the greater whole, you have to, in computers, you've got to basically slice and dice and make the computer do all these little tiny bits and then pull it all together with your software. So I had to have somewhere to start, so I decided, well, that emotions fell into one of two categories. There were words relating to emotions. They were either building tension, and that was reflected by those times in your life where your muscles tense or your abdomen suddenly gets really tense, and you have this sudden inrush of breath. You can think of this as the first few minutes of September 11, 2001. If you happen to be watching the television or whatever, or as soon as you became aware of it, though, at least during those first few minutes, your body reacted viscerally to this, and your guts responded to it. That's a building tension emotion. Then there's the release tension. The release of emotion is basically the period of linguistics that we're in now. It started, this last rush here of it started about August 22nd or so, and then it slides straight down to October 25. And you'll see a lot of language about people releasing their emotion, and so in that it's a lot of shouting, anger, visible use of fear language, etc., and it goes into some great detail. But the turn on October 25th is a very sudden, sharp angle up for about 10 or 11 days of building tension language. Now, one way to look at that, and I'm not saying that this will be the case that will emerge, but if you're old enough to remember, in the 60s, we had this little nose-to-nose standoff between the U.S. and Russia that we all called the Cuban Missile Crisis. And that was a number of days in which everybody was tense because we actually didn't know if we were going to go to war. And if so, it would have been a terrible war because of the intercontinental ballistic missiles and thus the global fear of this whole event. So the whole planet that was aware of the circumstances at the time was in this very tense mind frame. And I've been able to go back. When I started doing this work, I started examining historical periods where I knew particular emotions were dominant, and therefore I could go back and look at the language of that time and assign an appropriate emotional value that I could then pull forward into my current work, if that makes any sense at all. But in any event, so I examined the language around the Cuban Missile Crisis and saw the point of release when everybody said basically, oh, whew, it's not going to happen, and we maybe skated on this one. And so it was very easy to watch that sort of a turn.